When I turned 71, I thought I understood grief. I was wrong. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Michael, my only child, had been killed in a car accident. Just like that, my world shattered. He was only 43, a brilliant doctor, kind, thoughtful, my reason for breathing. At the funeral, as I stood at his grave, I noticed 3 small girls standing near an oak tree, identical in black dresses, hands clasped tight. They walked slowly to the fresh earth, and each placed a single white daisy on the grave. Then one of them whispered, so soft it almost vanished. "Bye, Daddy," I gasped. They turned to look at me, wide, serious eyes, then ran, disappearing behind the cars. Michael had no children, shaken by the truth hiding in plain sight. This is the story of a grieving mother, a secret family, and how love returned through unimaginable loss. My name is Marleene Patterson. I'm 71 years old. For most of my life, I believed I had everything figured out, until the day my world collapsed. I was a retired widow, living in a beautiful home just outside the city. My late husband, Gerald, had been a financial advisor. He invested wisely, and after he passed away 8 years ago, I managed our estate carefully. We had no debts, no worries, just peace, quiet, and money in the bank. People called me fortunate. They didn't know how hollow that fortune felt without the family we had built together. My son Michael was everything to me. He was our only child, a kind, brilliant man who built a career as a respected physician. He called me every Sunday without fail. On Mother's Day, I could always count on a bouquet of my favorite lilies, accompanied by a handwritten note. He was thoughtful like that. Michael never married, mentioned any serious relationships. He always said his work kept him too busy, and I believed him. He was driven, maybe too driven. I worried sometimes that he didn't make enough time for himself. But I never imagined how little I truly knew. The phone rang on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in the kitchen, pouring my second cup of tea. It was the same kitchen where I'd made Michael's lunches for school, where we sat and talked for hours about his dreams and plans. Something in my chest tightened before I even picked up the receiver. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Officer Williams with the State Police. I'm calling about your son, Michael Patterson." Time stopped. He said words I'll never forget. Collision, unresponsive, declared at the scene. I heard them, but I didn't understand. I kept asking him to repeat himself, hoping I'd heard it wrong. But I hadn't. Michael was gone. Just like that. One careless driver, one red light run, and my son's life ended in an instant. Everything after that felt like moving through fog. The hospital staff made the arrangements. His colleagues called, each sounding stunned and heartbroken. They shared stories about his late nights, his compassion, his dedication. One doctor said he practically lived at the hospital. He gave every patient his all. I smiled politely, nodding. Inside, I felt a rising guilt. Had Michael worked so much because he felt alone? Had I failed him somehow? Maybe I should have pushed him to take vacations. Maybe I should have visited more often. I had no answers, only regrets. The funeral was held at St. Mary's Church, where Michael had been baptized. The pews were full, doctors, nurses, neighbors, patients, even former classmates. Everyone spoke about him with reverence. I sat in the front row wearing the same black dress I wore to Gerald's funeral, one I had hoped never to wear again. After the service, we walked to Greenwood Cemetery. The spring air was crisp. I walked slowly behind the casket, flanked by my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who held my arm as if she knew I would collapse without it. When the final prayers were said and people began to leave, I noticed 3 little girls standing near a large oak tree. They were dressed in matching black dresses, their hands clasped tightly. They walked up to Michael's grave with solemn expressions, each placing a white daisy on the mound of fresh earth. Then one of them whispered, "Bye, Daddy." I gasped. The girls turned to look at me, their eyes wide with something between surprise and fear. And then they ran. "Did you see them?" I asked Mrs. Chen. "Who, dear?" she said, scanning the empty space. "The 3 girls." She looked at me with concern. "There's no one there, Marlene. Maybe it was just the emotion of the day. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, eyes wide open, heart pounding. I replayed the moment again and again. The way they looked at his grave, the white daisies that whispered goodbye. Could they have been Michael's daughters? Could I have missed something that big? By morning, I had made up my mind. I would go back to the cemetery. I had to know the truth. For the next several mornings, I returned to the cemetery. I told myself it was to visit Michael's grave, to find peace, to bring fresh flowers. But in truth, I was searching for the girls. I replayed the funeral in my mind, over and over, trying to convince myself I hadn't imagined them. But I knew what I saw. I knew what I heard. On the third morning, just as I was placing tulips at Michael's headstone, I saw movement near the oak tree. My heart skipped. There they were. 3 little girls in navy skirts and matching white shirts with cardigans. They walked slowly toward the grave, each holding a single red carnation. In the morning light, I saw their faces clearly. Identical. 10 years old. Serious beyond their years. They placed their flowers on the grave carefully, one by one. I stayed still, barely breathing. Then the girl in the middle looked up and saw me. Her eyes widened. She took a small step forward. "Are you Daddy's mommy?" she asked quietly. My throat tightened, but I nodded. The girls exchanged glances. Then the same one said, "I'm Faith. These are my sisters, Hope and Joy. We're 10. We'll be 11 in September." The names hit me like thunder. Faith, Hope, and Joy. My son's daughters. Triplets. 10 years old. "Where do you live?" I asked gently. She said Aunt Margaret, Faith replied. "She's our mommy's sister." "Then your mommy?" I whispered. "Diane," Hope said quietly. 4 years ago. "Daddy visited us a lot," Joy added. "Every other weekend, he took us to the park and taught us how to make pancakes." "Didn't he ever bring you to meet me?" I asked, voice trembling. Faith looked unsure. "He said you were still really sad about Grandpa Gerald. He didn't want to make you sadder." My heart broke. Michael had kept them from me, intentionally. He'd thought I couldn't handle it, that I was too sad, too fragile. All this time, I could have loved them, helped them, been there. Before I could speak again, a woman's voice rang out from behind me. Faith, Hope, Joy. "What are you doing here?" A woman in her 50s hurried toward us. Her face was tight with panic. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. She wore simple work clothes and exhaustion in every line of her body. The girls moved quickly toward her, eyes lowered. "I just wanted to say goodbye again," Faith said. Margaret looked them over, then turned to me with narrowed eyes. "Who are you?" "I'm Marleene Patterson," I said, standing. "Michael's mother." Her face went pale. She grabbed the girl's hands. "You need to leave. This isn't your place." "I just want to understand." "You have no rights here," she snapped. "Michael made his choices. Don't make this harder than it already is." She turned and walked away, the girls trailing behind. Faith looked back once, eyes full of confusion. I stood alone, stunned and aching. My son had kept a secret this big, and now he was gone. I couldn't stop thinking about the girls. The way Faith had asked if I was their daddy's mommy. The way Margaret had looked at me. Protective, scared, angry. I needed answers. I needed the truth. I drove to Michael's old apartment building. The manager, Mr. Torres, had helped me clear out his belongings after the funeral. When I walked into the lobby, he greeted me kindly. "Mrs. Patterson, how are you holding up?" "It's managing," I said softly. "Mr. Torres, can I ask you something personal?" He hesitated, but nodded. "Of course." Did you ever see Michael with children? Little girls? He looked around, then lowered his voice. 3 of them. Came by every so often with an older woman. They were polite, always quiet. Sweet kids. My heart sank and soared all at once. I hadn't imagined it. They were real. I thanked him and left, more determined than ever. That Saturday, I returned to the cemetery. I parked under a tree where I could see Michael's grave, but not be easily seen. After an hour, I saw it, the old blue sedan pulling up near the entrance. Margaret stepped out first, followed by the girls in weekend clothes. They walked to the grave, each carrying small bouquets of flowers. I waited a few minutes, then approached slowly. Margaret saw me and stiffened immediately. "What are you doing here?" she said, stepping in front of the girls. "Visiting my son," I said calmly. Faith peeked around her. "Grandma Marleene," she whispered, "can we talk to you?" Margaret's face twisted with conflict. After a long pause, she sighed. "Not here. There's a diner on Maple Street. O'Malley's. Give us 10 minutes. 20 minutes later, I sat across from Margaret at a faded booth while the girls shared fries and milkshakes. The diner was quiet, the perfect place for a conversation we'd both been avoiding. "How long have you been caring for them?" I asked gently. "Since Sarah died. Almost 4 years now." "Sarah? Was their mother?" Margaret nodded. "My sister. She had a genetic condition. Weakens the muscles. It's rare. Hereditary." My chest tightened. "Do the girls have it too?" "2 of them," she said quietly. "Hope and Joy. Faith seems clear for now, but we won't know for sure until she's older." I looked at the girls, laughing, passing ketchup between each other, so full of life. "Michael never told me," I whispered. "He didn't want to burden you," Margaret said. "He said you'd already lost Gerald. He thought this would just break your heart." I blinked hard. He was wrong. I'm not fragile. I could have loved them. "I believe you," Margaret said slowly. "But he was just trying to protect everyone." "I want to help," I said firmly. "Not just financially. I want to be in their lives." Margaret studied me. "This isn't going to be easy." "I don't expect easy," I said. "I expect honest, and love, and effort." She looked down, then gave a slow nod. "All right, we'll try. But their needs come first, always." "Always," I promised. The following Saturday, I visited their home. Margaret had insisted the first visit happen on their turf, where the girls felt safe. The house was small but tidy, filled with drawings on the fridge and backpacks neatly lined up by the door. It was modest, but it radiated love. The girls greeted me with a plate of slightly burnt chocolate chip cookies and wide, nervous smiles. "We made them ourselves," Joy announced. "With too many chips," Faith added. I smiled and took one. It was perfect. As we settled in the living room, I began to notice the small things. Hope resting against a pillow. Joy shifting uncomfortably after only a few minutes sitting upright. Faith, ever attentive, subtly adjusted a blanket over Joy's knees and helped her hold her glass of milk. These girls had learned to care for each other in a way no 10-year-old should have to. Later, Margaret and I sat quietly in the kitchen while the girls colored in the next room. "Hope and Joy both have the same condition Sarah did," Margaret said softly. "A form of muscular dystrophy. It gets worse with time. Sarah started showing symptoms in her teens. With the right care, we can slow it down, but it's expensive. Therapy, medications, adaptive equipment. And then there's the fatigue. It's relentless." I swallowed hard. "And you've been doing this alone?" She nodded. "I work nights cleaning offices so I can take them to appointments during the day. I nap when I can. The girls help more than they should. My chest ached. I had no idea. Michael didn't want you to know, she said. He thought you'd already carried enough grief after losing Gerald. He didn't want to break your heart again. But hiding them broke mine anyway, I whispered. Later that afternoon, the girls invited me to the living room. We made you something, Hope said. It was a book, crayon drawings bound together with yarn. Stick figures labeled Daddy, Aunt Margaret, Faith, Hope, and Joy. He used to read us bedtime stories every time he came, Joy said. We still have the videos. Faith pulled out a tablet and played one. Michael appeared, smiling wide, sitting in what looked like his apartment. Hello, my beautiful girls, his voice said. Today's story is about 3 sisters who saved their kingdom. He changed his voice for each character, made silly faces, and acted out a battle with an invisible dragon. At the end, he looked straight into the camera. Remember, he said, you are the most important things in my life. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. I couldn't stop the tears. He had been a wonderful father, and he had been carrying all of alone. After the girls went to bed, Margaret and I sat quietly again. Her expression changed, softer this time. There's something else, she said. About Sarah. She didn't just die from complications. She took her own life. I froze. She was terrified the girls had inherited it. When they started showing symptoms, she couldn't cope. One night, she just didn't come back. Michael had protected me not just from the children, but from the full weight of his reality. I stared down at my tea. He didn't trust I could handle it. Margaret said gently, he trusted you completely. He just didn't want to add more pain to your plate. I looked at her, then toward the hallway where the girls were sleeping. He was wrong. I would have handled it. I would have helped. Then help now, Margaret said softly. They still need you. And for the first time, I knew I needed them just as much. 3 weeks after I entered the girls' lives, Dr. Chen called us in for a follow-up visit. We thought it would be routine. Hope and Joy sat quietly in the corner, coloring. Faith, ever watchful, sat protectively between them. Margaret and I took seats across from Dr. Chen's desk. She folded her hands. The genetic testing results are back, she said, and they've confirmed what we suspected. Hope and Joy both carry the muscular dystrophy gene. Margaret's hand tightened around her coffee. But there's more, Dr. Chen continued. The progression appears more aggressive than expected. The air left the room. Without intervention, she said, the girls would likely face significant mobility challenges within a few years, possibly wheelchairs by adolescence. Life expectancy would also be shortened. Faith had stopped coloring. Are you talking about Hope and Joy? She asked quietly. Margaret looked down, unsure how to respond. Dr. Chen gently explained there was an experimental program at Johns Hopkins, a promising treatment protocol designed specifically for their gene variant. It's intensive, she said, 6 to 8 months minimum, possibly longer, but early results are encouraging. Some children have experienced strength. Margaret looked stunned. I can't take that much time off work, and we can't afford to move. The girls have school and we barely manage now. Dr. Chen hesitated. The program covers most medical costs, but not living expenses, housing, travel, lost wages. It adds up. I looked at the girls. Hope, concentrating, tongue tucked between her teeth, Joy humming softly. They had no idea their futures were being decided. But Faith knew. Her eyes were locked on mine. What happens if they don't get this treatment? I asked. Dr. Chen's voice was soft. They'll continue to weaken. Eventually, they won't be able to walk. Their independence will decline. It could shorten their lives. Margaret made a broken sound beside me. I reached for her hand. I took a deep breath. "We'll go," I said. "All of us. I'll cover everything: housing, caregivers, tutors, whatever they need." Margaret turned to me in disbelief. "You don't know what that means." "I do," I said. "And I've already lost my son. I'm not losing them too." Faith stood slowly. "I think Daddy would like that," she said, her voice clear and steady. That night, I began the application process for the program. I called my financial advisor and explained I was shifting my priorities. He didn't argue. Within 2 weeks, we had a plan. And by mid-April, we had rented a small house near Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. The girls had new doctors, new therapists, and a daily schedule that required meticulous coordination. The first month was exhausting. Hope and Joy were constantly tired. The medications made them nauseous. Margaret and I took shifts staying up with them. Faith started to feel left out, unsure of where she fit in this whirlwind of care. But then things began to shift. Joy took 3 extra steps without help during physical therapy. Hope's stamina started to improve. Faith joined the school's debate team and won her first local competition. The girls began to laugh again. The new house slowly became a home. We created a routine: morning stretches, schoolwork in the kitchen, therapy in the afternoons, story time before bed. Every Friday we had pizza night, complete with games and cartoons. Joy always picked the movie. Hope organized the board games. Faith insisted on cleaning up afterward. Margaret, once hesitant to accept help, started to breathe again. One evening, she came home wearing a navy blue badge clipped to her shirt. She had taken a position at the hospital as a patient advocate, helping families navigate the same systems she'd struggled through. Her experience gave her a voice people listened to. "I never imagined I'd do anything but clean offices," she told me quietly one night. "But I finally feel like I'm part of something bigger." "You are," I said. "So are they." The family that had once been defined by secrets and grief was now being rebuilt with honesty, support, and relentless love. Our lives were chaotic, yes, but also full of purpose. For the first time in years, I woke up each morning knowing exactly why I was alive. We were no longer just surviving. We were healing, together. 6 months into the treatment program, Dr. Chen sat us down after a routine checkup. Hope had just finished playing a short piano piece in the clinic lobby, and Joy was sketching characters from a story she'd started. Faith, as usual, stood nearby, observing everything like a tiny general. "I'd like to invite the girls to participate in a new case study," Dr. Chen said. "Their progress has exceeded expectations, and the research team believes their journey could help other children feel less alone." Margaret and I exchanged glances. "What would it involve?" I asked. "Interviews, extra monitoring, and a few educational videos. Nothing invasive, just their stories, in their own words." Faith answered first. "If it helps other kids not be so scared, I think we should do it." Hope and Joy nodded in agreement. "We know what it's like to feel scared," Joy added. "And to not know what's going to happen." That night, back at the rental house, Margaret and I sat on the porch while the girls practiced for their upcoming school talent show. Faith with a short speech, Hope on piano, and Joy reading one of her original stories. The laughter drifting through the window made the silence between us feel full, not empty. "Our lease ends in 6 weeks," Margaret said finally. "We need to decide what's next." The question had been hanging over us for weeks. This move to Baltimore had started as a temporary solution, but now everything felt different. The girls were thriving. Hope's piano teacher had suggested she apply for a conservatory program. Joy had won a Young Writers Award. Faith was preparing to run for student council. "They're settled," I said. "They're happy." Margaret nodded slowly. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of staying, of losing all of this, of thinking maybe we've finally caught our breath only for it to disappear again. I reached for her hand. "You're not alone anymore. Not ever again." She looked at me with tired, grateful eyes. "I've never had help like this. It's hard to trust that it's real." "It is," I said. "This is real. This is family." A few days later, we brought the girls into the conversation. Over pancakes, we explained that we were thinking of staying in Baltimore permanently, but only if they wanted to. Faith asked, "Does that mean we'd have to change schools again?" "You," I said. "You'd stay in your school. Your teachers, your friends, all the things you love." Hope asked, "What about a piano? The apartment doesn't have space for a real one." Joy leaned in. "Can we paint our new rooms however we want?" "To all of it," I promised. The following weekend, we toured houses. The girls came to every showing, offering their opinions. One home had a music room with natural light, a perfect space for Hope. Another had a reading nook under the stairs, where Joy immediately curled up with a book. Faith prioritized which schools were nearby and which bus routes would keep them together. We settled on a colonial-style home just a few blocks from the hospital. It had 5 bedrooms, 2 offices, and a backyard full of trees. It was more than a house. It was a promise of permanence. As I watched the girls race across the lawn, their laughter echoing off the brick walls, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. This wasn't just about them. This was about me, too. For years, I had lived in silence, empty halls, lonely holidays, days marked only by routine. But this was love. This was love. And this was exactly where I was meant to be. 6 months later, the house was no longer new. It was home. The walls were covered in the girls' artwork, taped up stories, and school certificates. Laughter echoed from room to room. There were crayon marks on the baseboards and glitter in the carpets that refused to vacuum away. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Hope practiced piano every morning, her fingers stronger, her posture steadier. Her music filled the halls like sunlight. Joy wrote stories in spiral notebooks and taped them to the fridge like published novels. Faith debate trophies lined the mantel, next to framed family photos. Us at the zoo. Us on the porch. Us baking cookies in our pajamas. Margaret, once so tired and cautious, now carried herself with purpose. She had enrolled in a certificate program to become a full-time patient advocate. She studied at night, after the girls went to bed, highlighting textbooks and scribbling notes while sipping tea across from me. One evening, we sat down to dinner. Pizza night. As usual, the debate began. "Pineapple doesn't belong on pizza," Faith declared, wrinkling her nose. "It does," Joy protested. "It's sweet and salty. That's perfect." Hope, always the quiet middle ground, said, "Only if it has extra cheese, too." Margaret raised her eyebrows. "I'm staying neutral." I just smiled, soaking it all in. The noise, the opinions, the warmth. This chaos had become my joy. Later, after the girls were asleep and the dishes were done, I sat in my room and looked at the photo on my nightstand. Michael, younger and smiling, sat on a picnic blanket with 3 tiny girls piled into his lap. Faith grinning wide, Hope looking serious, Joy with a finger in her mouth and eyes full of wonder. They looked so much like him. My fingers traced the edge of the frame as I remembered that moment at the cemetery. The 3 girls standing beside his grave, holding daisies, whispering, "Bye, Daddy." That whisper had torn something open inside me. It had led me here. From that moment of goodbye had come this lifetime of hellos. Hello to bedtime stories and therapy appointments. Hello to school pickups and Saturday morning pancakes. Hello to unexpected dance parties in the kitchen and quiet nights sharing tea while the world slept. I had gone from being a widow with a big empty house and a fading sense of purpose to a grandmother with messy days, full hands, and a heart that often overflowed. Every ache, every long drive to the hospital, every late-night worry. It was worth it. Michael had once feared that knowing about his daughters would break me. What he didn't know was that loving them would be the very thing that put me back together. They had turned my silence into music, my grief into motion. They had become my why, and I would spend every day of the rest of my life loving them forward. Together, we had turned loss into family. And that family was everything, our Marleene Patterson. I'm 73 now, and if you had told me 2 years ago that my quiet, predictable life would turn into this whirlwind of therapy schedules, school debates, bedtime stories, and piano recitals, I would have laughed. Or cried. Or both. I thought I was alone. But 3 little girls changed everything. What I've learned is simple. Never assume you know the whole story. Love has a way of finding you, even in the darkest places. Sometimes, it comes when you least expect it, wearing school uniforms and carrying daisies. If you're ever given the chance to love, take it, even if it scares you. Especially if it scares you, because what waits on the other side might just be the best part of your life. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were in my place? Have you ever uncovered a family secret that changed the way you see your past? Thank you for spending time with me and my girls. If this story moved you, I've left 2 others on the screen that I promise you won't forget. Until next time, love bravely, hold tight to the people who matter, and never be afraid to say hello again after a painful goodbye.